Hello class, and welcome to this Blades of Steel NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101 by way of Let's Play with Brigands. I'm your instructor, Professor Brigands, and I hate to date these classes, but we are running this class just ahead of the Stanley Cup Finals. Thought it would be very appropriate to dedicate an entire class to this NES Ice Hockey Classic. A lot of people's pick for the best hockey title on the NES. It's right up there with the original Ice Hockey from Nintendo for me. That's how much I love this game. But in terms of difficulty, Blades of Steel, it can take a little while to adjust to the speed of the game. Not to mention controlling your goaltender, that's always the wild card. There are 3 different difficulties in the game, 3 different settings you can choose. We're going with the hardest one, so if you're playing on that, I'm going to go ahead and give Blades of Steel for the NES a 6 out of 10. On the frustration scale, this equates to biting down and then throwing your controller across the room, or maybe the rink, I should say, more appropriately today, which probably would make it go even farther with rink being made of ice, but I digress. We've got plenty of tips to help you take down any opponent you come across, human or computer controlled, and a lot of that has to do with our guest TA today. Class, give a warm welcome, returning as guest TA here on Video Games 101, once again, Doc Lewis, everybody.
Hello, Professor, and thank you for having me back.
Of course, always happy to have you, Doc.
Yeah, not a lot of people know that I got my start as a bench coach back in the 70s for the Brooklyn Blades.
Yeah, little birdie told me as much.
I think you mean little cat, but yeah, I get your point. But yes, when I got into boxing coaching, before I switched to having my fighters lightly jogging behind me while I pedaled on a bicycle-based training techniques, I used to have them lace up a pair of skates and make some laps around the ice. You may not realize it, but a lot of the same footwork applies to dancing like a fly as it does skating around a hockey rink.
Well, I can't wait to see what you have in store for us, Doc, as, Doc's going to be joining us as our guest TA for the first period. Blaze and Gary have some tips they're going to be sharing a little bit later as well. And Fluff has a number of interesting facts about Blades of Steel for the NES, so let's run the intro and get into this Blades of Steel NES walkthrough right here on Video Games 101. Alright, as we begin a new game, we're going to play on Tournament Mode and the hardest difficulty of Pro, and you can now select your team. Doc, is there any discernible difference between all the teams here in Blades of Steel?
Well, Professor, I spent a lot of time with all these teams in the early 80s, and I'll admit, I believed I began to see patterns emerging with certain times, noticing this team was winning a lot more fights or was faster or seemingly had stronger goaltending than other teams, but then I'd see those same patterns and those same traits in other teams. So in the end, every team is exactly the same, and any patterns you think you might see emerging are simply the product of the moment-to-moment changing context in any matchup. So don't overthink it, especially when there's a New York team to pick. But of course, that's just my Brooklyn roots coming through.
Well, I appreciate your being objective, Doc. Thank you. We're going to go with Chicago just because. I'm not saying having the Pope on our side is going to help us raise the cup, but I'm not saying that.
Fair enough, Professor.
So again, we're going to go ahead and do the Pro League tournament to kind of raise the stakes here. This is an 8-team, 4-bracket tournament with the 4 winning teams moving on to the semifinals, and then the 2 winners of those playing for the nondescript Pro League tournament trophy. For dramatic purposes and the fact that we can teach everything we need to about this game in a single matchup, we're going to go ahead and skip to the final of our Chicago team versus Minnesota. And as you're here with us through the first period, Doc, how about you first tell us the controls for Blades of Steel?
Thank you very much, Professor. Note the difference between offense versus defense. Buttons have different applications. I don't know why in God's name B is pass and A is shoot, but nonetheless there it is. On defense, tapping B allows you to switch to the nearest defender of the puck, and A has no application on defense. You just run into your opponent to try to check them and maybe get into a fight. Speaking of which, when you're in a fight, you can hit B to punch and then A to block, and then tapping up and down to change up or down in terms of where you're punching or blocking. But yeah, just move with the D-pad. Note that this also controls the goalie at the same time, and tap B when that puck hits the ice on the face-off to have a better chance of winning that face-off.
Well said, thank you, Doc. And we're gonna cover the ins and outs of the fighting a little bit later, even though, I mean, we got you here right now, Doc. Do you have any tips on maybe best way to win a fight here in Blades of Steel?
Well, I think you already know what I'm going to say, Professor, but stick and move. Stick and move.
I think I could have guessed that.
But in all seriousness, no, I'm just going to let Blaze talk about that a little bit later.
All right, then. How about going over the Briggs notes, the keys to winning in this Blades of Steel NES walkthrough?
All right, yes, so as is the case in a lot of NES-based hockey games, older games in general, you want to prioritize controlling your goalie when you get into that defensive zone. Once that puck crosses over that blue line into your area, you might want to switch over from controlling the defense and just focus on minding where the opposing player is going to be shooting that puck, getting in position. I recommend that you line up your shots when you have time to do so. So you'll notice you can't aim your shots, but you're at the mercy of this up and down arrow, which is always bouncing around. And if you have no one around you, then take some time to obviously shoot where that goalie is not. And if I can maybe make an amendment here, Professor, to the Briggs notes.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Doc.
Thank you, yes. So in addition to aiming where the goalie is not, I recommend that you shoot from sharp angles relative to that goalie. So kind of extremely above and below that goalie rather than coming straight ahead in the middle of the ice, and generally have higher percentage chances of potting a goal in that case. And then finally, use Blaze and Gary's tips, kind of alluded to his fighting tips for Blaze, and then Gary's got some tips for you later on as well.
Thank you, Doc. So good start so far for the Chicago team here. Up 2-0 so far. And you got to be careful when ever someone shoots from the far side of the rink. This is more effective, obviously, against other players than, say, the computer, who can react and see it coming. But yeah, if you shoot from the other side of the ice, the other person you're playing will probably have no idea where their goalie is positioned at that time, and not a whole lot of time to react to get in position, make that stop. But yeah, you can see right now we're getting hemmed in our own zone, just trying to react to all the shots from Minnesota right now. Obviously, we would bring up one of our defenders in that case. There we go. Sometimes the computer or the other player forces an error on their side, like while you're midway through a shot, they'll kind of knock you when they're trying to check you, and they won't take the puck away, and you'll still get that shot off, but you'll be sliding across the ice, so it comes in from a different angle than even the computer is expecting in that case. So,
and if I can also interject, Professor.
Of course.
So another tip, coming in low, especially off of face-offs when the goalie is high and that arrow is low, that leads to a lot of high-danger chances, as we call them in hockey, as you can see right there. You'll pot a lot of goals against the computer in particular by winning those face-offs, hugging the bottom side of the ice right there, and then taking those shots, just lining them up, taking the time. And yeah, you can see it paid dividends right there.
Certainly did. Thank you very much, Doc. 4-0 right here in the first period, just stunning the Minnesota fans. It's our sturdiest player, number 4 right there, taking all those checks, not going down, not giving into the fight right there, not taking the bait when we're up 4-0. Crowd's loving it. Must be a lot of Chicago fans that drove in for this one here at Konami Arena, which according to the manual was sold out through the year 2010. Anyway, we're coming up on the end of this first period. Do you have any last-minute tips before you get out of here, Doc?
Yes, here's one very important tip for when you're hemmed in your own zone, forced to control your goalie, and just struggling to come up with a rebound, as they are very hard to come by. I recommend staying in the back of the net, so holding left if you're on that left side, just getting all the way as close to that net as possible. And then when that shot comes into you, right about when it touches you, push forward, and in my experience, that increases the chances that you can actually grab that puck and pass it off to one of your skaters so you can skate out of your zone and create some more offensive chances at the other side of the rink.
Well, thank you as always for joining us, Doc. It's always a rare treat when you can stop by and guest TA on any of our classes here on Video Games 101, so thanks for the time and thanks for sharing some of your expertise.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Professor. I always have a great time when I stop by, and let's go Chicago. Something I never thought I'd say.
Doc Lewis, everybody, big thanks one more time for stopping by as we are putting on a clinic here at the Konami Arena. 5-0 as the skaters do their customary coordinated skate. Not sure the Minnesota team is thrilled about doing that right here. I bet things are about to get a little chippy, us having such a massive lead over them right now, so we could probably stand and learn a thing or two about holding our own in the fights here in Blades of Steel. So with some tips on doing just that, repurpose from his normal role, let's go to Blaze.
It's Blaze's best here in Item Sky. Alright, the key to winning fights here in Blades of Steel is to stay on the offensive. Don't waste time trying to block, but come out swinging. You generally want to alternate high, and then low, and then back to high, but if your reaction time is good enough to recognize that your opponent hasn't adjusted their guard, you can chain a second and sometimes even a third attack in the same area in a row. Still, when in doubt, just alternate back and forth, and you'll typically win the majority of your fights here in Blades of Steel.
Good call, Blaze. Yep, got to see that in practice right there. We're winning the majority of our fights here so far. Not just winning on the scoreboard, but we're clearly the more physical team as well. So should mention that part of the rules, I'm putting up air quotes as I say that, of Blades of Steel's hockey is that that was a close one there, that when you lose a fight, as is not the case in actual hockey, the ref carts your barely life-filled carcass off to the penalty box where you're kept there for a couple minutes or so as we finally give up a goal right there. Just couldn't get that rebound right there, and there's Doc's sharp angle shots tip coming into use right there. It works on the computer, it works on other human players. I think it's just basically, if you're not getting that puck dead on for your goalie, then there's a greater chance that it's going to squirt through maybe the 5-hole. You maybe get 90% of it, but just enough is going to bounce through. So that's why those sharp angles work so well, and they're so difficult to defend against, to get yourself in the right position a lot of times versus, like there's another one right there back to back. So just like that, Minnesota's trying to make this a game here. For what it's worth, I know this sounds like loser talk right here, but at the end of this, just to show you what the shootout format looks like, and for dramatic purposes, we're going to even out whatever score that the other team is down by at the end. I should mention two things. One, you can pass the puck with B, but you can pass it into your own net, actually. So you can shoot with the pass button, in other words, which sometimes you might opt to do in place of going with the conventional route of tapping A, because there is no way to get around that long windup, even 2 feet in front of the goal. Our players, or all players, insist on doing a wind-up slap shot for 100 mile per hour shot, when just a little finesse will do. There you go. Doc's tips still getting the most out of them as we reassert our 5-goal lead here in the second. Gave up 2, but we got him right back just as quickly. But for what it's worth, if the goalie's out of position and you're right up front and you've got maybe the arrow's not in the right spot for a shot, the arrow's right on top of that goalie, then you might decide that you want to just go ahead and tap that B button as you're facing towards the net right there, which kind of works as a weak shot in that case, which you can actually control. Passing's not great, I will say. It doesn't always pass to the obvious person who you think you're aiming at a lot of times. A lot of the controls, unsurprisingly, are kind of loose here in Blades of Steel, but it's still a lot of fun. Speaking of the passing, does anyone know what he's exactly saying with that digitized speech? I like the digitized speech. Gives it more of a immersive feel, but always sounds like Chris Kattan to me. I don't know, he's a big Mango fan. The announcer, I'm not sure, but anyway, maybe Fluff can shine some light on what he's actually saying and give us some other facts as we go to Fluff for the first time today to get some facts about Blades of Steel for the NES.
Blades of Steel is a 1988 NES port of the previous year's arcade hockey title of the same name. Speaking of the arcade title where the voice samples were much clearer, the line is actually, "Get the pass." Though I like your interpretation, Professor.
There you go.
Konami decided to create Blades of Steel based off of the success they had with 1986's Double Dribble basketball-themed arcade title, which was also ported to the NES the year before Blades of Steel. While the original Blades of Steel is far and away the most well-known game out of its bunch, it's part of a small series of games bearing that name, beginning with this, the original Blades of Steel, and concluding with 1999's Blades of Steel 99 for the N64, and 2000's Blades of Steel 2000 for the PlayStation 1 and Game Boy Color. The original Blades of Steel is still held in high regard amongst fans of the NES era as one of, if not the best hockey-themed game on the console.
Thank you, Fluff. As we are just in time for the second intermission, and what are we going to get? The Slapshot and Bear, or are we going to get little Gradius right here? Oh, it's Gradius time as we're taking on Big Core, just like the pros do at the second intermission in hockey games. Not nearly as many shots you need to put into Big Core here. Has no bearing on anything, but it's fun. Blam! Little promotion there. Contra. Jackal. What an exciting game. Fantastic graphics. Awesome music. All your friends will want it. They will kill over it. Konami. There you go. Kind of like how Culture Brain throws in their little plugs for games during my favorite baseball title on the NES, Baseball Sim 1000. But yeah, speaking of other solid hockey games for the NES, obviously we have regular ice hockey, which we did a class on. You can check out via the playlist in the description. There's a much more obscure title, though, for the, well, not even for the NES. It was a Famicom exclusive title called Iki Iki Neketsu Hakibu Subete Karande Dairantu. I'm sure I butchered that. I don't know. Fluff told me about this game, though. I checked a bit of it out during a recent Let's Burn with Brigands, and it's pretty cool. It's part of the Kunio-kun series, so it's got the big head characters, you know, from your River City Ransom, and then I guess more of the sporting, got like World Cup and Super Dodgeball, another favorite. Super Dodgeball and River City Ransom, two more games, which we've done classes on here on Video Games 101, but yeah, same basic concept, same characters and everything, but it's a hockey game with a lot more plot to it, and I was really impressed. Kind of bummed that we did not get that on Western Shores in the 90s or late 80s, but anyway, let's get another Fluff fact as we give up another goal here, and as I said, as we get closer to the end of this period, we're going to let Minnesota get back into this one. Wink, wink, pretend that it's just based on their solid play that they're going to tie this up so we can show you how to do the shootout here in Blades of Steel. But Fluff, how about another one?
The epic cover art of the NES version of Blades of Steel was inspired by a real-life photograph of Wayne Gretzky from the 1983 Stanley Cup Finals, although Gretzky's number and likeness were both altered. At least he got a number, though, as the other player, Tomas Jansson, didn't even get one. This picture was also interpreted on the Famicom cover of this game with a few changes, such as Jansson retaining his actual number and Gretzky looking a bit like he's in some kind of bowel distress, but I digress. Speaking of the Japanese version, it preceded the North American version by 5 months, and lacked some of the polish, not to mention bells and whistles we got in America, like the second intermission's animated hockey-playing bear, or interactive game of Gradius. Incidentally, another Konami classic, which you can check out our recent class on here on Video Games 101 via the playlist in the description.
Thank you, Fluff. Yeah, they definitely got the short end of that stick. We're even throwing some fights now, as you can see. Just really trying to sell the idea that Minnesota, you know, must be feeling pretty good about themselves as we skip through their celebrations here. Hockey's a game of momentum, you know, and clearly all the momentum's on Minnesota's side right now, but I love the games within games, you know, the Gradius in this one. Lots of examples of games which feature games within the games. There's a lot of games which have NES games as part of them if you know where to find them. We talked about an example during our class on NES Golf with that nice tribute that they hid away on the Switch to Iwata after his death. But yeah, Maniac Mansion and Day of the Tentacle. What's your favorite example of that, class? As we go to even up things here with Minnesota right here at the end. Fluff, while we're doing this, you got one last Fluff fact you can share with us about this game?
While the teams in Blades of Steel are simply identified by their cities, the manual for the Japanese version of this game has nicknames associated with every team. These include the New York Devils, possibly a reference to the actual NHL franchise, the New Jersey Devils, and one which undoubtedly irks the fan bases of both the New York Rangers and New Jersey Devils. Next, we have the Chicago Angels, so there's a little connection there if you want to consider them rivals. The Los Angeles Hawks, the Montreal Fighters, the Toronto Eagles, the Edmonton Bears, the Vancouver Bombers, and finally the Minnesota Wilds. Another name which is interesting considering when Minnesota got a new hockey team in 1997, they named the team the Minnesota Wild.
That's fun. Fun little coincidence there. I'd like to think that it was related, but I know better. So we're all even up at 10 now. Couldn't help myself with that 10th goal right there, but one last thing to mention before we bring in Gary to talk about the overtime shootout. Should mention another way to get into the shootout kind of setup is to do a penalty shot, which they will award you if you get into a fight right in front of the other team's goalie, or vice versa. If they start a fight right in front of your goalie, they'll award that opposing team a penalty shot. But Gary, tell us how to do this.
It's Scary Gary's Boss Beaters. Alright, the key to penalty shots and shootouts here in Blades of Steel. First, if you're on offense, it's just a flip of the coin. Shoot wherever you want and hope the goalie doesn't react accordingly. But we are in net on defense trying to block a penalty shot or a shootout shot. Then the key is just taking your time and making sure you know where that puck is going to go before you react. There are 9 possible spaces where that puck can go, with the top, middle, and bottom rows, and then left to right you have 3 columns as well. So yeah, just take your time when you see him make that shot, first to know if it's going to be that left column, middle column, or right column. Don't even have to move if it's the middle column, depending on where it's going. If it's coming right at you, you don't have to move at all, but if it's going low and right, just hold low and right, or down and right on that D-pad and tap A to get down there. You can block that 5-hole by holding down and tapping A to block it if it's going low, but that is the key. Just make sure you know where it's going. Take your time before you react. Your goalie will get in position very quickly relative to the relative slow velocity which that puck moves at, but that's the key to penalty shots and shootouts here in Blades of Steel. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Gary, and an exciting finish for the Chicagoans. What Fluff say they were called? The Chicago Angels. But yeah, the very strange rules here in Blades of Steel. From taking penalty shots from a static position just at the blue line, just hacking it soccer style, to getting thrown in the penalty box for losing a fight and giving up a penalty shot if you take a fight in front of your net. I don't know. They do have icing. I will mention that. Yeah, if you advance the puck from behind your side of the red line beyond the blue line of the opposing team and you don't get there first. Actually, it doesn't matter if you get there first in this game. So, yeah, not a lot of realism here in Blades of Steel, but still a fantastic time. And we're the ultimate champion, so that's always a nice thing to hear. If you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing to enroll in Video Games 101. We do one of these classes every single week in the same spot. We'd love to have you enrolled. Click that like button too if you don't mind. Really does help us out to make future classes for you. And leave a comment. Is this your favorite hockey title on the NES? And I mentioned earlier, what is your favorite kind of hidden game within another game, or favorite instance of that? Doesn't have to be on the NES. I think there's a couple few examples, but that's our time for this week. Big thanks again, not only to all my TAs, but especially Doc Lewis for stopping by and giving us some great tips here for Blades of Steel as we enjoy some last-minute shots. I do like the stills, the black and white photos here as we hold up the cup. That's a great final shot right there. Well, that's our time. We'll see you next week in the same spot for next week's class, right here on Video Games 101.
Blades of Steel.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and comment on this video and click subscribe if you haven't already, as this seriously helps me to keep making great content for you. And check the description of this video to see what song is playing right now.